Now, once you have developed the ideas and the requirements of your products, right, we're going on with our next persona in today's session, which is John. In the scenario, John, today, he's basically the head of R&D, and John needs to manage the increasing product complexity, and customers expect from him that he frequently delivers new product innovations. And one of the key needs he has is he needs to basically have product data which is centrally accessible, highly consistent, and transparent, and that across the extended enterprise. And what he also needs, and what he also needs is a data model which is flexible and which can cope with the increasing complexity, right? And he wants to have a streamlined and system-based process where he can collaborate with internal and external stakeholders. Our end-user research for R&D personas indicates that all of these needs are very challenging to be addressed, right? Because on the one hand side, you have accelerating innovation cycles. Everybody expects that you deliver new innovations faster. At the same time, your supply chain is in distress, right? And you're not able to get to the right parts at the right time. On the other hand side, we see more and more compliance and regulatory pressure on R&D roles, right? Because they need to comply with, for example, new laws, right? New sustainability engagements, right? And on the other hand side, the IT landscapes and R&D organizations also grew over time in the last decades, right? And tend to be very complex. So we want to show you on how EPD as our cloud solution for PLM, PDM type of process in the future can help people like John to establish streamlined business processes, right? To improve the collaboration with internal development partners, but also with external development partners and suppliers. And we also want to show how EPD can be used to align faster with compliance, with manufacturing, but also with other roles in downstream processes, like, for example, in operations. And the ultimate value proposition of our of EPD is to help John to fulfill a custom product demand, like what we basically just talked about in the presentation from Senit, on how this custom product demand can be fulfilled with a very quick time to market. Okay, in order to address this, we are continuously expanding EPD with new capabilities. We already briefly touched in the context of requirements management, our systems engineering capabilities. And we are continuing to invest in these areas, to bring the requirements management closely together with the system engineering capability to give you a model-based development approach. Talking about the model-based product development approach, in August this year, we launched a new capability, the Enterprise Product Structure, which gives our customers a tool to create modularized product structures and kind of have the product development in the future more flexible. We will talk about collaboration a few more minutes after the next presentation is a bit more in detail, but the general idea is to make this product development process as collaborative as possible and involve third parties, development partners in this development process. And today, in this session now, we want to really focus on two new capabilities we are adding to the stack. The first one is a new configuration management capability, where Martin will show you on how you can improve product development by creating snapshots of your product development across the entire life cycle in product development. That is number one. After that, Felix will join and show the new specification management capability, which enables us to store product informations on the DNA level of a product, right? So, for example, what other raw materials are used? And questions like that, these types of informations we will be able to manage in the specifications. And at the end of this presentation today, we talk about also the CAD integration and the new recipe formulation, but that's something what I park for the last slot in today's presentation. But for now, the launch of the new config management solution, and handing over to Martin. Over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot for the introduction. Exactly. So I'm happy to explain you and to share with you what we've been working on for the last couple of months, if not year. So on the topic of configuration management, and thanks for moving forward the slide. So what's it all about? So if you just imagine you're on a, so first I start very high level, just imagine you're on a family gathering, so everyone is running around, children is running around and so on. But then at some point of time, you bring all of them together and you have a camera, you are able to make a photo of that, a snapshot. And then you have this snapshot, and then you know exactly, oh, these three were there, the cousin was not there. And you can take that and file it somewhere in the basement in a box. So this is a very high-level explanation of this topic. And as we've just heard, so the world is constantly turning a little bit, it's more complex and complex. The supply chain disruptions, figuring out the best parts, the best supplier, and so on. So it's always a ongoing challenge. So therefore, it's really important to have to exactly know where I am. So to have a very good means of communication, and that's exactly the purpose here of the new capability of this configuration management. So to provide a possibility to really say, this is what we talked about yesterday, and that's what it's now today, and that's how it was 3 weeks ago. So, and what's behind that? So we have the possibility to come up with baselines, to create these snapshots, to take these photos. Then we have the possibility, and these baselines, they can then be used, for example, for internal collaboration. You can take this baseline, and the baseline is an identifiable object, and you can say, I take baseline 13, and I take this one and hand it or then send it over to the guys from the documentation team, and send it over, for example, for the handover colleagues, so that they exactly know this is what I'm talking about. I was talking earlier with my photo example in the introduction about the configuration plans and phases. So this is exactly what we need. We need to define some boxes, because over time you will not only have 1 or 2 photos, but you will have hundreds and thousands of photos. Of course, we need some structure, some shelves, some boxes where to put them in. These are exactly these configuration plans and the phases inside. The majority of our customers is working, the vast majority is working with enterprise critical processes on the S4 and ERP/ECC side. Therefore, for us, it was really important to link these 2 applications, the configuration management and the source of the data, as closely together as possible. And that's exactly what we are doing here, where we get, for example, these snapshots, where we get the baselines out of the systems. There we provide some powerful extraction mechanisms. Yeah, and because communication, you need to know exactly what we are talking about. So the release process is also very important for us. So to have today, we have a status network, but over time, and this is the first release, so yeah, bear with us. So over time, workflow, for example, is for sure an important tool here. Yeah, if you could maybe click to the next slide, that would be nice. Thank you very much. So in the next 10-15 minutes, I will walk you through our live demo. And this shows what you will see in this live demo. So first, we create a box. We create this shelf. We create the configuration plan. So we have a new project, a new excavator, a large one, and for that, the box is needed. Then I need a phase, because in the box could be, so the excavator project could have lots of photos. So therefore, I need some shelves inside of the box. These are my phases. Phases could be the first iteration, for example, queue gate, release process. So all that could be names for this shelves. Afterward, I create the baseline, upload the data from the backend system, from the S/4HANA system, and then gonna release. And yeah, in theory, I could then create more bombs and more baselines, get more data. Yeah. Okay, having said that, I will now go to my to my screen sharing. And I hope you can see my screen, so it looks like it.
Yes,
and yeah, then so here you see there's a couple of new tiles. So the EPD Launchpad will become more busy and more busy every time. So let's get here to the configuration plans. And you can see already a couple of them, they are existing. Yeah, so for those who are not working day and night in the EPD system, so it has a couple of nice goodies, for example, like this filter. So I only see, for example, those baseline, those configuration plans that were created by me. So it's super simple to come up with these, to use these filters and find something. So it's nothing spectacular, but it really helps in the day-to-day life. Now let me create a new one. So the name is now our large size excavator. And yeah, in order to be able, because if there are lots and lots, therefore we have a tagging system. So that's helping them with finding later on. Yeah. Description. So, and that's it. So I've created now a new configuration plan. Like I said, this is the box that I'm talking about. Of course, long text, things like that, they are always there. Now let me go to the to the lifecycle phases. So, and I would just for this demo create a couple of small phases, like my first Q gate. Yeah, gate. Yes, and yeah, release phase. Some, yeah. So you can. That's completely up to you. What will be what you enter there, but what the name of the boxes of the shelves is there. So now we go here to the first Q gate and go in the details to that as well here. So we can enter the long text, but now the interesting thing is basically the creation of a baseline. So let's go here to these to the baselines, and right now there are no items available in this baseline, right? So let's first of all let's save everything, and then let's go there. And in the baseline, that's now the moment where I gonna. So we have here the baseline app, and for the baseline app, let me now create a new baseline. So first I have to talk to tell the system from where, what is the backend system? And that's what I mentioned earlier. So we have the good old ABAP system, the good old S/4HANA behind. So we have a controlled object, that's now my excavator. So I've prepared something yeah, there it is. Now it is really about my configuration plan ID. So we have here these excavator. Now we have here the lifecycle phase. So here it was the early planning phase, and now my description. Excavator first baseline. Create. Okay, now I have created the baseline, and what is now missing is really to pull the data out of the backend system, just to show you what I'm doing. So we have here material master, we have a BOM excavator. So, and this is how it looks like in the ABAP system. So we have a multi-level BOM behind it with a couple of components, obviously with a couple of BOMs, and that's what we are now pulling up in the system. So the product, the material master is the excavator. There it comes. That's very nice. So the system is constantly then with type ahead looking in the backend system what is there. No planned. So the bomb application for doing the bomb explosion is ENG, alternative 1, the date from today. So, and get the data up. And what is now happening is, so all the data gets uploaded. So first save here, great. And what is now possible, I can have a look here, and as well, here at my excavator as well, we have all the possibilities to add additional data there, additional item information. So I hope the upload is already done and finished, otherwise the system will tell me. And everything that you've seen there is now available also here on the system, but now frozen. So you're now looking at the picture from from the shelf in the basement. So I can see now all the pictures, and because you need this data later on for the communication. You need it maybe for later on for auditing purposes, for externals that want to track basically the progress of your application. For them, you can now prove that here the baseline ID 16 is this composition. And that's exactly what was done. So it was created at this day. I was the guy who created it. So now this has a real handle. Now this is a real object that can be used for follow-up procedure. And you see all the data, all the information is available here. And if you are interested, because you need that for the auditing, for the auditors, for the follow-up processes, all the details are then listed in here. So the next one of our roadmap items is also to add this UI5 flexibility, which allows you also to adjust all these pages on your own as you need it, and to bring in all the data in the way, to visualize it to the end users, to your customer, to your users, exactly in the way that you need it. So now I've created the baseline, and of course then the status cascade is starting, like in work and releasing and so on. So as said, this is with the status network is right now working with showing the status. The thought is really to provide here the workflow, so that you have, for example, the head of the department who will then later on press the release button and say, okay, this is exactly the baseline that we'd like to use for follow-up processes. So having said that, we have achieved a lot, I think. So we have created a box. We have added inside of the large box, we have a couple of smaller shelves. And in this small shelf, we put an envelope with a photo. And the photo is now the one-to-one image of the situation that you find in your productively used ERP environment. Having said that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and hand over to you, Ismail.
Thank you so much, Martin. I think this is also very exciting, right? Because again, like we have said earlier, right? So you have the situation that we have products which are constantly evolving, right? And different people in the value chain need to look basically at the product, right? And having basically now the capability to create these configurations, to create these snapshots, right, gives us the capability at any given point of time create such a snapshot, right, and provide people across the enterprise to access this data, right? And we do that also by tightly integrating the config management with the bombs on the S/4HANA side, right? And with that, we're providing now a new capability on top basically of the bill of material applications we have on the ERP side, right? So very happy about this release as well. If you have any questions to Martin, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A tool, of course, to answer your question. So that's kind of the second new capability we are releasing with our 22.11 release. Next up on the list is the specification management capability, which is also a brand new release. of a capability. And here I would like to hand over directly to Felix to introduce what this capability is all about and for what it will be used in the future. Over to you.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much for the intro. All right. Specification management, as introduced, it's a new capability that we're now releasing in its first version with the 22.11 release. And we're all super excited about the capability because it really is something new in terms of concept for an EPD application. So previously in the applications, we were mostly working with data that is already existing or data that is related to one of the backend systems. But now with specification management, and as Carsten introduced it as well, we really take the concept of data and product master data, or really data describing products, raw materials, etc., to a new level by providing a capability now on our PLM cloud stack to really have an own persistency and the origin of data really stored here. And this is due to multiple factors, mostly because data requirements towards raw materials and products become more and more complex from more and more directions. So while we have industries that really put a lot of emphasis on this data already, looking at process industries, so food, chemicals, etc., that have many, so to say, meta information or product DNA information that they were already capturing today, these increasing data requirements come in many more different facets in terms of sustainability information, compliance information, really raw material parameters that originate in a product development setting and then really need to be captured to enable decision making, not so much to enable the current classic processes that supply chain processes can run, etc., but really to enable decision making both at the beginning and the end, but throughout the whole product life cycle. So making good product decision relies on good data. So what kind of impact will a product decision or a material decision have on recyclability, sustainability, compliance, etc., on what markets I can address? And having this information ready right at the beginning is really key. So let's have a look at specification management overall. So some feature highlights of the solution, of the target solution for specification management that we're working towards. So first and foremost, we want to enable our master data specialists in the companies and our product developers to really effectively manage all product data information that, so to say, is generated and originates over the course of the product's life cycle or the material's life cycle. Really in all product dimensions, really having a central place to store for all of the material meta information, so to say, that is created and will become more and more relevant for all companies looking especially at sustainability parameters, topics like plastic tax popping up, etc. There needs to be an object that stores all of this information. Then for sure, we're talking about an object that has a lot of complex information and a lot of information dimensions stored. So what we really did, and what was one of our big focuses, was really providing a user interface where it is easy for a user to understand how to work with the data and how to maintain the data. So really leveraging our property tree. And we will expand on that concept by really providing a dynamic property tree that then really aligns on what is the perspective that I, as a role, for example, as an approver, I'm looking at the data, or as a product developer, I'm looking at the data to provide what is relevant to me at that point in time. With a system like specification management, where we have a lot of flexibility to define own properties in the system, to describe the product portfolio of a company, we also have a big emphasis on additional topics, because just flexibility on its own is not the answer to a real end-to-end process. So we have at the same time in mind as well to provide property templates or property packages, predefined packages of properties for other SAP solutions, so that the data can be used in all downstream processes on a data level, so to say, out of the box. For example, towards a product compliance solution or towards a responsible design and production to calculate the plastic tax by having commonality in the data, while still allowing the flexibility to describe all additional, so to say, product dimensions and properties that reflect your product portfolio as a company. One big topic is the possibility to maintain compositional information. For those of you that did not work with composition so far, is essentially alternative views, like bill of materials, but from a different viewpoint. So I don't only want to know what are the input items that I need to build the product, but maybe I want to know the composition of which types of plastics or polymers are in my product and how much of these are virgin plastic. So I need to have just a different listing or a different composition of how the product is made up. And this is essentially what we want to provide with specification management. So we are really happy that in our version 1 release, we already have a lot of functionality built in. So at the face of it, it might seem like a simple solution. But if you look under the hood, there's really a lot of dependencies and a lot of configuration, so to say, flexibility that is needed to build a solution that is then really usable by the market. So for today, as a small demo, we're just going to have a look at 2 main applications, but I just want to share the following slide where we see a bit of the dependencies and a bit on the slide level still as an explanation. So we have one main application, which is our managed specifications application, where all of the data to one raw material, one product, etc., comes together, and we can really leverage it from there. But we have a lot of configuration applications that make this possible. So the definition of specification types to assign status profiles, or the property trees then in the end to really show how the properties are visualized. A status management has to be there as well, which we already just saw. The same component we're using in EPD in the configuration management as well, with the possibility to define flexible status networks, assign them, use them in workflows later on. Product categorization is important to know what is it that I'm looking at. So which part of the product portfolio is it that I'm now looking at, and maybe what properties are especially relevant for this. And then essentially additional configuration applications. One that we're going to look at beside our managed specifications app is here at the right-hand side of the screen, which is really our property management app. And this is, so to say, the core of what makes the specification management even possible in the system. The possibility to define new properties, so attribute and fields, as well as compositional properties that then can be used to capture the data and, so to say, to capture all of the relevant elements on the screen. And with that, let's jump over. Again, a system demo probably says a lot more if we see how the objects behave in the system and what will be, so to say, in the release scope. So let me just switch over to my specification management launchpad, quickly reloading the page. I'm logged in, still logged in, that's good. So nothing stands in the way to have a look at the applications. So we see now the launchpad as part of EPD, of specification management, with all of the different applications that we just saw in different categories. So our specification management app, the configuration, the composition configuration applications, and some more common configurations like unit of measures, etc. So let's dive right into our managed specifications application. And what you see will be quite a familiar sight. We have, first of all, a list view of all the specifications that we have in the system. I've preset as well a custom specification list for my overview here for my industry cleaner example that I have, where we see different things or different information already displayed. First of all, as in all of our list view applications, a flexible filter where you can also adapt the filter criteria as you need it. And then some details on specifications that we have in the system. So we see in this case, 8 specifications are filtered for my specification list. It's our industry cleaner, ease of clean, with a bunch of raw materials belonging to that industry cleaner. We see also the specification type reflecting here what the specification is about. So we see that this is a finished product specification and a raw material specification. And we see a bunch of additional information like the product category it belongs to, which can be used as an additional filter and just to describe like where it belongs. And later on also as an authorization criteria to separate different parts of the company that you can specify who is allowed to see specifications from which product category and type, etc. The status, we see that some of them are already released, like the raw materials. Our specification here is still in progress. And one big topic that we have to mention here, which is something really new for the specification object is the possibility to have a full versioning, so to say, built in. And versioning really allowing us to have also multiple versions of a specification to see them side by side, but also to edit on different iterations during the development to then, so to say, track the product parameters of the specifications. So let's have a look at one of the specifications. Let's enter our industry cleaner. And this is now really a simple example just to show you or to give you an idea of how the properties and property trees look like when we have the possibility to maintain the data. So at the moment, we just have 2 tabs available in our version 1, which will be extended following our roadmap items that we have for the solution, like different referenced objects, collaboration, integration, etc., document attachments. So for now, we just have the general information, so header data, and the core of the specification, really the properties and property tree. So we see we have an ID, a name, status, essentially the similar solutions or the similar items that we had also in our list view application. And let's move over to the property application where we have now our property tree. Property tree we can expand. We see we have some simple properties like boiling point, density, flash point, melting point, which color it is, and some compositions in our property tree, and we can have a look at how these look like. So again, these are really simple properties just to showcase like how does it look like in the application. So here for the boiling point, we have a simple property with a field, numeric and unit of measure. This can be extended also to have multiple fields displayed here on the screen, or even just a table-based maintenance in the next iteration of the specification management to really have all of the flexibility to maintain the data. So we see we have our boiling point. It's entered here with a 109 degrees Celsius. And we can specify the configuration, for example, which unit of measures should even be allowed, or if it should be restricted to a certain dimension. So in this case, for the boiling point, we made a restriction for just the temperature in our settings. We can also have a look at a property of a different type, like the primary color, which is a character-based field, where we can now enter, for example, which color our cleaner has. And this is a phrase-based characteristic, meaning if I go on the selection here, I can select from some predefined colors like a drop-down values, and I can only maintain from these drop-down values then allowed inputs to make sure that the input is really following the same pattern. So one additional functionality of the properties. So in this case, we will leave it as it is. For our compositions, we can have a look at what are the ingredients going into our industry cleaner, and we see some of the raw materials that we just had, like our ethylene, xylene, etc., with all of the different information on what should be the minimum, maximum, or target values when putting the solution together. In this case, also as an analytical composition, meaning that only proportional values are allowed, meaning percentage, parts per million, etc., and the whole product has to be summed up to 100%. We can also use just list-based composition, where we just have a listing of what is inside without unit of measure input, so just knowing what is inside, for example, for declarable topics, or also a reference quantity, like so much is inside the product per 100 grams or per 1 piece, etc. Or also additional information like packaging specification to know exactly what are the packaging materials of our classic specification. All right, so with that, it's a small glimpse at the specification overview, and just to, so to say, sum it up to show you where is this information coming from. We really put a lot of effort into simplifying the property creation for specifications, which is now a one-stop shop application in our properties application. And we can already see some of the information that we just saw in the property tree, like our density, our heavy metals composition property. And we can define a property type, either a composition or an attribute property, or it can be both in case both, so to say, facets are needed, with the possibility to also extend it in case we get some requirements from the market for dedicated property types for specific solutions later on as well. So what we can do, we can have a look at our ingredient composition. that we just saw on the system. So we see some composition information. We can also go into the edit mode and see these are the rows or the columns that we had displayed, which specification type is allowed, and some additional qualifying information just to set the composition up. Or in case of the other properties, we can also have a look at an attribute property like our secondary color that we had just picked, where if we go in, we see there's exactly one field assigned for it. We can go ahead and have a look what kind of field it is, or we could create an additional field and here just very easily specify, like, is it a numeric format? Is it a character-based format with a standard list, like a table that is behind it, or a phrase collection that is set up in the system, or then additional field types that we can pick from, like data and Boolean. We will add URL fields, or also have the possibility to extend this field type for specific use cases later on. So it's really easy to now in this system set up the properties and the property tree then in the end to define what is relevant or what data is relevant to then be used or to be displayed in the system. And it really allows us to capture all relevant information right at the beginning in the development phase where the data originates, and then make it available later on for decision making, or make it available to downstream applications that need this data input, like responsible design and production, to calculate the plastic tax that will be incurred from putting products into markets, or like product compliance that will then make decisions or compliance assessments based on the data of the products actually. So this is again just a small glimpse as part of today's overview session into what specification management is about, what specifications or what the intent behind specifications is, to really give you a tool to capture all relevant product information and data that goes also way beyond what would be the logistical need or the supply chain need of data. In the end, this will allow you to make better product decisions by having this data stored into a central system, and will also focus on providing data to other SAP applications or for partner applications in a streamlined way from EPD, from specification management. And with that, I would head back to Ismail for announcing then the next overview presentation slot.
Felix, thank you so much for walking us through the spec management scope. Maybe there's one question which I just want to ask you, because that's coming up quite often, and then there are a few others in the chat which you can maybe take. And I know you briefly talked about that, but can you also mention one or two use cases on how specifications as an own object can be leveraged in discrete industries? So that we just repeat that, because I feel that is very important that everybody understands that this is not to process industries, but we see more and more relevance in discrete industries as well. So could you just share one or two thoughts on that?
Yes, for sure. I mean, one big topic there is for sure the sustainability aspect of products. So there is a lot of work going on being able to define sustainability characteristics and to share them in standardized formats, or just to capture this information to make it available, as mentioned, for example, for the responsible design and production. So there's a lot of regulations in EU countries and outside of EU countries as well for plastic tax that companies have to pay when putting different packaging materials into the markets. So this has a direct financial impact on the product decision, and being able to make a decision where the product in the end will be both sustainable but also profitable, you need additional data that is today very often not stored and has no home. And this is one big use case where specification management can come in. Additionally, there's a lot of information on material properties that usually needs to be there in product development to make good decisions on, like, what raw material should we use. And then there's product or material characteristics that need to be stored additionally, and this is where specification management then comes in and really excels at giving the flexibility and being, so to say, or giving the possibility to define all of this information, what is needed to describe a company's product portfolio.
Awesome.
And I see there's a bunch of questions in the Q&A which I will try to answer right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Felix.